Welcome back to the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. I'm Ty Higgins. Happy to have with us from Wright and Moore, Ryan Conklin and Nicole Steiner. We have not met Nicole yet, but we will here in a bit for what we affectionately call people problems versus legal problems. Ryan, Nicole, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us, Ty.
You and I talked, and the one thing we're missing is a theme song. So I
Yes.
found, yeah.
I've been working on it in all of my free time. Nicole, I don't know if you're bringing any musical talents to the office here. So
Farmer's Daughter's always been my favorite, but that's probably because I am from a dairy farm in Wayne County. And
There
so
you go.
that was always my theme song.
See,
But
I grew up on like Pressure Luck and Card Sharks and everything like that. So $10,000. I know it's $25,000 pyramid now because of inflation. Back when I was a kid, it was $10,000 pyramid. So all those games are what I'm accustomed to.
maybe for our topic on people problems versus legal problems, like a Maury Povich or Jerry Springer themes, is that more fitting? Or is that...
Oh, we're gonna throw chairs soon, Conklin, is what you're telling
Yes.
me. So
I think you're giving off some Steve vibes from Jerry Springer, Ty.
with the bald head for sure. Hey, Nicole, before we get into it and talk about some scenarios for our people problems versus legal problems, we have not met you yet. Tell us about yourself and how you got to where you are today.
yeah, so I grew up on a dairy farm in Wayne County, and I studied agricultural communications at Ohio State. Before I went to law school, I worked at Certified Angus Beef for 5 years, and then I attended Liberty Law, and I just took the bar in July, and this is my third week on the job here. Waiting for those bar results, so hopefully everybody can send good vibes my way.
Yes. Fingers crossed. Third week on the job. They already have you on the podcast. They must think pretty highly of you for sure.
Yes.
So.
Yes, we do. We're thrilled to have him.
So highly, in fact, that Nicole, you're getting the questions. And so we'll start with this first scenario, people problems versus legal problems. So let's say one spouse is gifted land or inherits land from his or her family. Is that land considered a marital asset and is subject to potential divorce recovery? Is that a people problem or legal problem? And how do you see that situation shaking out?
Well, it's definitely both, but it does have an underlying legal problem here. And what this is getting at is whenever people go through a divorce, property has to be determined whether it's marital or separate, because marital property has to be divided, whereas separate property, you brought that into the marriage and you can take it out. But even after you're married, if someone specifically gives you a gift or you inherit something, that is considered separate property, but you do have to still protect that in a way. So there's things that you can't commingle, that you can't increase, you can't go maybe use your partner or spouse's wages to increase that value, because that's when it really starts to get messy.
And we see that actually those exact scenarios all the time. We see inheritance received, but once those spouses start to commingle funds, use it to pay property taxes, install tile, expand a livestock herd, that's when it starts to get money.
What's crazy about that too is if you're trying to prove in court that it is marital or that it is a gift or inheritance, you have the burden of proof too.
Mhm.
So if there's no evidence that this was a gift, even though you might be right, it doesn't mean that you can prove it either. So it can get kind of messy.
You use that word messy a lot. This second one, I think, can get pretty messy too. So, people problems versus legal problems. Let's say one parent's deceased and the surviving parent is planning to remarry. What are some of the options the children of the surviving parent can use to protect the farm their parents built and ensure the new spouse does not access any of those family assets?
Yes. So once again, this is both. So the people problem here is sometimes when dad gets remarried, we don't like it because it feels like it can be replacing mom. But I heard some really good advice the other day, and they said that if somebody gets remarried, even kind of quickly after their spouse passed away, it's usually a reflection that it was a really good first marriage. And so maybe we should sometimes cut older people some slack when they do get remarried. But in those situations, we want dad or we want mom to be happy, but we do still want to protect those farm assets. And I think that's where we can use the relational piece to maybe drift into that legal water and perhaps do a post or a premarital agreement. That's kind of like one of those words that people don't like to hear, and it's like brings up all of the red flags. But I hope we can move in the direction where we can have this conversation without without people being so offended, and that we can understand the why behind that. And that really is to protect that farmland for that next generation.
And what you would say, maybe those new incoming spouses fears the dreaded gold digger tag. That's what nobody wants to be labeled as. And there's a wide range of relationship reasons for wanting to get into those unions. But yeah.
Yes, and as we look at how valuable farms are, people think, oh, well, I just have 100 acres, or I just have some land out there. When we start putting values to that, I mean, we've all seen land prices these days and how much it's going for an acre. That's where like the real danger can come in, that it cannot be self-sustainable. And so that's why it's so important that we have those conversations beforehand. But also, perhaps if they are really marrying for love, and we want to make sure that that new spouse is taken care of. And so there are options where maybe we grant them a life estate or something of that sort, so that they can still live on the land, live in the house, but they just can't, sell off the family farm.
Ryan, you've been in this a long time. How do you minimize the mess? Do you have clients come to you before they even start these conversations to have you kind of, begin them yourselves? Because you're going to know the right things to say. You're going to know the right people to talk to, and how they might respond to what you're talking about. How does that process work?
Yeah, Ty, we tell folks all the time that we make much better fire alarms than fire extinguishers. Once the fire is raging, we might be showing up with no more than a garden hose to put it out. So all of that is meant to say, the more time that you can give Nicole and I, or give your legal counsel or your professional team to plan around a major life event like a second marriage, the more options that are going to be on the table to really achieve all those family goals. I've worked in plans before involving second marriages. We've got assets from first marriage or from remarriage that are protected in trust for those children of the first union, so that to ensure those children receive those assets down the road, and that the second spouse is able to benefit from those assets, maybe enjoy them, kind of like how Nicole described, but we don't have a risk of a sale or losing assets through a divorce there either.
If these scenarios sound even vaguely familiar, ohiofarmlaw.com is the place to go to find out more about Wright and Moore. Ryan Conklin, Nicole Steiner joining us on the podcast. Thank you guys so much for playing People Problems versus Legal Problems, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you, Ty.
Hi, I'm Craig Pullman from CAP Farms here in Southeast Van Wert County. I always call it a small to mid-size family farm cash grain operation. I'm the one here full-time. I've got a neighbor hired part-time, and my dad's still around here, I would say 6 or 7 months of the year. Otherwise, he's down snowbirding in Florida. The health benefits plan through Ohio Farm Bureau, I've priced that several different times through the years. And just the last year, my wife and I made the decision to sign up for it. We were struggling to get quite the coverage we wanted exactly through her work, which is how we've been getting our health insurance for a few years, a handful of years here. And so we priced it again, and it was really priced competitively. Was actually the same price point as her work insurance, and that was with her getting a subsidy from her work side. So was really pleased to see that.
Learn more about the Ohio Farm Bureau Health Benefits Plan at ofbhealthbenefitsplan.org.
Find out how Nationwide Agribusiness can help you grow your business. Get to know the people with the experience and knowledge to help you. Whether you are looking to protect your farm or ranch from the ground up, or need someone who understands your changing commercial ag needs. Find out how to better manage the risks of your ag business, or how quickly you can get back to business. Learn how you can protect your next with Nationwide on your side.
This is the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. I'm Ty Higgins. Hopefully you got your new edition of Our Ohio in the mail, covering everything energy, talking about electricity here on this podcast. Power needs are increasing. Power resources are becoming more diverse. What does that all mean for energy use in rural Ohio and beyond in the near and distant future? Craig Grooms joins us. He's the incoming CEO of the Ohio Electric Cooperatives, going to be replacing Pat McLaughlin here later on this year. Craig, welcome to the podcast. Congratulations on the new role.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and everyone else across Ohio. Yeah, again, I'm Craig Grooms. I'm the current Chief Operating Officer with Buckeye Power and Ohio Rural Electric Cooperatives, incoming CEO starting in January. I've been with the co-op network in Ohio for a little over 20 years. My utility career goes back about 30. Prior to that, I was in the U.S. Navy for 6 years, originally from the Dayton, Ohio area, with a lot of family ties back to Southern Ohio, a lot of farming relatives in Adams County. So yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the energy landscape in Ohio.
And a lot to talk about. So, how would you describe the state of affairs in terms of energy demand for Ohio right now?
Energy demand across Ohio, I would say, is fairly stable, yet growing in certain parts of the state. So we've all heard about the new Intel facility, a lot of the data centers, which are energy hogs. They're looking for a lot of electricity. And so AEP has communicated that they expect to see the electrical demands in central Ohio double over the next, let's say, 8 years. We also have pockets across Ohio where, residential, farm, commercial, industrial demand is pretty level, very modest growth. So as a state, we haven't seen a lot of electrical demand increases, but we are slowly seeing that, and we expect that to increase over the next, let's say, 8 years.
Whenever we talk about growth, like you're talking about, I've been by the Intel site where you see all the new transmission lines going over
Yeah, yeah.
161, and I've been over to the new battery facility that Honda's putting up and the new
Hmm.
substation there just off site. Infrastructure is a nice part of this conversation we have to have. Is it there to support the surging industrial demand that we're seeing across Ohio?
So when we talk infrastructure, there's a couple components to that, right? You have the transmission infrastructure that you referenced of seeing for a lot of these new facilities, especially in central Ohio and in southwest Ohio. And then you have the generation, the actual power producer infrastructure. And so the transmission infrastructure is being built out. AEP has pretty substantial, very robust transmission system. We think we'll be able to meet the demands on the transmission infrastructure side. The generation side is a bit more complicated. The fact that Ohio as a whole is a net importer of electricity, and this really goes back to laws that were passed 25 years ago when Ohio deregulated the electricity business and really got out of the business of having utilities own generation and really let third parties or independent power producers, or in the case of Buckeye Power, the cooperatives own their own generation. So the concern we're seeing is that transmission infrastructure can be built or already exists to serve these loads. But the generation part of this formula is a bit of a concern because we'll have to import electricity to meet those new loads.
And we're talking a lot about these major new centers in, the three C's and other parts of Ohio. You did mention, though, a little bit earlier about what we're experiencing at the farm level. Can you talk more
Yeah.
about that and some of the trends you're seeing with energy with farms across Ohio?
So we're not seeing any major changes when you really get out into rural Ohio. We see some pockets of residential growth in what were formerly farming communities. But houses are a lot more energy efficient. We're not seeing any huge demand. We're not seeing changes in how farms or rural or Ohio really utilize electricity, right? We're not seeing a lot of farm tools, tractors, combines. Those are not being converted over to electric vehicles. So we're not really seeing any dramatic increases in electrical demand across rural Ohio. I'd say, if anything, it's stable. And then, as I mentioned, we're starting to see some residential growth in areas that were former farming communities, but otherwise, we're not seeing any dramatic changes in how people or farmers use electricity.
Demand is one thing, price is another. We are at a time with inflation right now challenging all Americans, of course, all Ohioans. Agriculture is going to see a 23% net farm income loss over the last 2 years. So affordability becomes a big part of this conversation. Where does that play into the energy talk we're having right now?
Well, that's depends on who you talk to, but in the co-op world for Ohio's rural electric cooperatives and Buckeye Power, affordability is part of our mission statement, right? So we're a non-profit cost of service electrical provider. So affordability, reliability, environmentally responsible power is all about why we exist. the rest of Ohio, we're more of a deregulated wholesale market environment. And so we've seen a lot of volatility in the price of electricity, as goes the region that we are part of. So we're seeing volatility. A lot of inflation we've seen is related to materials. Electrical equipment has increased 2 and 3 times what they used to be going back 5 to 8 years. So that's a real concern, and that impacts us, and it impacts the electric cooperatives across Ohio as well. But for the commodity of electricity, affordability is a big part of what we do. We operate coal plants, we operate gas plants, we have some hydroelectric facilities. And so we try to really stabilize those cost increases as much as we can to lessen the impact to the end user.
Seemed like your predecessor, Pat McLaughlin, and I talked about during the winter months, just coming really, really close to not having enough power to go around. What concerns do you have, not just about this winter, but in the near and long-term future about meeting overall energy demand?
Yeah, there's a big concern, primarily during severe cold weather, severe hot weather, right? And so that's when the strain on the electrical grid are at its highest. And so the concern we've had really over the last 10 years, and as we look out into the future, it will be multiplied, is the fact that we're seeing dispatchable and fuel secure resources being retired, either due to environmental regulations or because certain states have very aggressive CO2 emission reduction goals, and they've implemented laws that are forcing the retirement of very valuable and reliable resources. And really the only thing that is being proposed to replace those resources is solar and wind, which we all know is intermittent, and you can't call on those resources when you need them the most. So we're starting to see signs, and really going back, 2020, 2021 in Texas, Christmas of 2022 here in the Ohio region, and really the east of the Rockies region. When it gets really cold and really windy, it's hard for mechanical machinery and equipment to operate, and the demand for electricity skyrockets. And those are the periods when we need reliability the most. And, when it's 70 degrees outside, nobody really thinks about, the importance of electricity. But when it's -10 or 95, it's really important. And those are the times when we have to plan and make sure the grid is prepared and we have adequate supplies. And that needs to be at the forefront of all of our regulators and our politicians and legislators, is that we need to maintain reliability and availability when it's most needed, not when it's 65 or 75 degrees. So it's a concern now. And as we look into the future, if these resources continue to retire, we're facing more periods where the grid will be challenged.
So what are the options? And I mean, by saying that, what are some valid solutions? And you talked about regulatory issues. What are some sensible regulatory approaches that can be taken to see some long-term success in this realm?
It goes back to the thought of, if you're in a hole, stop digging. What we say is, if we have these concerns now and we're projecting more concerns into the future, stop retiring and stop closing dependable resources until you have a sufficient or adequate replacement, whatever that may be. I think we're going to continue to see more natural gas plants, but if you look at some of the US EPA rules, they're trying to prevent natural gas plants from being built. They're trying to force coal plants offline. So you have this disparity between what you want to accomplish and what you need to have happen. And what we're saying is, step one, stop what you're doing if it's causing a problem. So don't retire dependable, fuel secure resources until we really believe we have a sufficient replacement in place.
So what is your message to your members, and then what's your message to our members? We work hand in hand on a lot of these issues. So when you talk to agriculture and rural communities, what do you tell them to do to help maybe speed this along, or make sure their needs are met on the electricity front?
Yeah, so we put our concerns in, it's part of our everyday practice, right? Affordability and reliability. So we want to ensure that we maintain sufficient generation capacity to meet the needs of rural Ohio and the electric co-op membership. But we also need, we've been very vocal and out front on the regulatory effort to make sure regulators, legislators, policymakers, at a minimum, are informed of what the dynamics are. They understand what's happening, what our concerns are. If they're passing laws without really understanding the impact of those laws, at a minimum, we want to make sure they're educated so they understand that what they think they're accomplishing, they may be actually introducing some danger and some reliability concerns that were unintended. So for us, for our membership, for rural Ohio, it's really to make sure, be vocal, be active in political action committees to make sure the message about reliability is getting out. And it's not just for us, it's really for all of America, because we're all, at least electrically, we're all interconnected. So what one state does has an impact on other states. So everyone needs to be well informed and educated about the decisions that they're making.
Electricity, one of the big topics in this new Our Ohio, all about energy. Hopefully you got it in your mailbox if you're an Ohio Farm Bureau member. If not, you can find the digital edition online at ohiofarmbureau.org. The new CEO incoming, Craig Grooms of the Ohio Electric Cooperatives. Great to meet you. Congratulations on your new post, and looking forward to doing more of these with you.
Yeah, thanks for the time. Great discussion. Feel free to reach out to us with any questions you have, and look forward to the future.